All right. So last night, we played Dark Age of Man campaigns, session 3. This is the second session in a row. So David ran session 2 and last night session 3 as the presenter in Dark Age of Man. Myself, Melton, or the Outcast, technically don't have a name, but Melton is what I kind of thought of when I put this character's concept together. Dale is Saverick, the northern warden of the Dredge County, and of course Willem, the young ranger slash warden of the southern border of Dredge County. Uh, so a recap kind of the entire campaign. So in my session that kind of launched us, put it on the eve of the Grand Spring Fete, 4-day carnival, 4-day of fairs, as people are bringing all of the wares to Dredgewater. It's an epic day for the economy of the agricultural economy of Dredgewater and the Dredge County. The first RC that bam, kids were kidnapped, and the game was started with Faustus actually a tutor for the children of a couple of aldermen and the youngest child of the Washburn, Lord Washburn, and he says he's at the carnival, and I roll that first RC. It says kidnap. So I roll kidnap into that, and they end up chasing down the kidnappers. They end up engaging the kidnappers. They end up arresting that situation. They end up bringing back a prisoner. They end up killing the other two or three. Two run away. One guy dies, and one they bring back. But more importantly, they rescue the kids, and they learn that these people were working for Mort. They were sent by Mort to cause problems during this grand period of Washburn. Do anything you can to disrupt his economy, his trade. Just deter people from whatever. Right. So they were going to then meet Mort. They were able to deal with that. Willem got a Viking sword with runes inlaid from the deal. And as they were headed back with the kids, they ran into Washburn in the middle of the night on the road, coming to chase down these men. And he orders the two wardens angrily, Faustus, you come with me, and you and the kids come with me. This is David's character, Faustus, the tutor, the scholar tutor. You come back with me. You two stay here on the southern border and do your job until the fair is over, until the 4-day fete is over. Feet? Is it feet or fete? I never get it right. Okay. And so that's how session 1 and session 2, David, they are in the forest doing their job. They are patrolling in the forest. They have 2 soldiers with them that are, minions. And they end up finding pilgrims on the road that turn out to be spies. They end up in a melee. My character basically watches all of this from afar, is never engaged with another character or NPC until I attempt late in session to take his sword. Willem, as Willem brandishes this beautiful sword, my character wants it, tries to take it from him. That's the closest thing we have to an actual encounter. And really, we don't meet Melton outside of me describing this wild man who, was cast away as this deformed, twisted, again, I describe his cleft face, his malformed skull, his eyes he's a monster. He's basically a wild man who's been relegated as an outcast living in the woods for 16. He lived with a pagan woman until she died. He was 8. From 8 to 24, he has been quite literally surviving in the woods, spying and watching Dredgewater from afar. There have been moments where he's attempted to walk into Dredgewater, and they have pitchforked and torched him out. So we get a good background of who my character is, but we don't see my character interplay at all with anyone socially, which is a challenge. And that's the way it's supposed to be. He's, how am I going to handle this kind of arrested 8-year-old who has no culture at all? I mean, we're talking wouldn't understand religion, wouldn't understand any social etiquette, right? Right. Imagine barely remembering what you might have learned from your mother living in the woods, and then she dies at 8, and that's all you knew and never learned anything else. So that's where that session ended, as they stopped those guys, and David introduces horns, and the sound of Vikings coming up the road draws the curtain on that session. So last night's session 3, David opens in media res, literally with that scrum ending, my character running away into the woods, and them realizing they got to get off the road as these Vikings or this band of something, right, is coming up the road. They watch hidden from the woods, Savric and Willem, and Joff, one of the soldiers. The other soldier, Harold, had run away. They watch from the trees, hidden in the trees. They watch to see who this is coming up the road. They count 8 heads, a giant aged Viking on a large war horse, another Viking on a horse, and another scholar on a smaller horse, a learned man in robes, and well described by David. And then there's another 5 Viking warriors with them. They come upon this chaos in the road. We learn from the bushes that these men were probably scouts for who we learn is Redbeard. Dell has a great moment where Dell says, "Listen, I am this man that came from Slovenia. I have been around. This man, as you described him, he's an aged. I mean, he's definitely a fierce warrior who survived this long. He's formidable. What I have heard of him, do I know him? And we have a great role to determine if he does." And David describes who he is. He's Redbeard. He's Ludwig, I think, Lodweir or something like that. Redbeard, and he's basically a Viking slaver, right? And he ain't here. He ain't here to make camp and break bread and have a farm, right? He's here for far worse, right? They agree they need to follow them back and investigate, how many people are with him, where are they coming from, what are their plans, what are they doing? Meanwhile, Melton had run away, climbed the trees, and from the treetops watched all of this again. Can't really hear anything, but I can see kind of what's going on. But I can certainly see Savric, Willem, and the guard, Joff, and aware that the 4th guy in the tavern is not around here. So I begin to pan around the forest looking for Harold. We find out it's Harold. Harold is walking toward this, and I drop down on him, incapacitating him, and taking his tabard, right, pulling it on as my character is under the delusion that all I need to fit in Dredgewater is to look like these soldiers who have chased me out of Dredgewater who knows how many times over 16 years. And so I've equated their look, their uniform, their tabard with, oh, that's why they're chasing me out. I don't have this thing, right? Okay. So I fit it on, and then as they witness all this, Savric gives orders to Joff, you need to run back to Dredgewater as fast as possible and tell Lord Washburn we have Redbeard, and this is a potential major war party. So Joff takes off through the trees, running through the trees. My character parallels Joff, cuts him off, and embraces him. And we finally meet my character in an actual interplay with other human beings. And you got to remember, my character has never probably seen or talked to a human being really ever outside of the woman who would have raised him to 8 years old. I would have encountered human beings that would have chased me away in the forest, or I would have hidden from them, or we might have had encounters like that, but I would have never been able to really approach one and look at him. So I describe how I walk up and I scrutinize his face, and I'm taking in, because I'm having a chance to meet another human being. But my disfigured face and my countenance are terrifying. And Joff, my prestige score roll, he reacts such, and he gets scared, and he attempts to stab me with his dagger, and I definitely just bat it away. I grab him as I attempt to communicate with him that I am him. I am one of him. Look, I'm wearing the same thing you're wearing. See. But at the same time, when I first cut him off and he saw the tabard and everything in the dark, he immediately said, "Harold, is that you?" And my character then said, "Yeah, that's who. I am a Harold. I am a Harold. I am you. I am a Harold." So we have this interplay. He passes out in fear as I spat his feeble attack to stim me away. I drag him over a tree, prop him up. I make a small fire, and I wait for him to wake up. We cut back to Savric and Willem as they make chase, following this Viking group back to their camp, to a rise of hills where they can look over into an old Roman watchtower ruin. So it's like a partially, all that's left is like a partial half moon of stone wall that has been slowly dilapidated, and people have probably come and stolen stones for other things, like to build a wall or something around their farm, or right. So we have this old Roman watchtower, which is also hides a beacon that would be lit, right, to warn Washburn, right. So they know we got this kind of old broken down tower with a beacon. They hide there and they watch on. And Savrik, when he sees the numbers, and they spend some time counting heads best they can, and they start watching the movements, Savrik basically orders Willem, you need to go tell Washburn right now. You need to tell him. Well, let's put it this way: while Willem is digging out the ranger cache that hides their food and weapons and stuff, they're hidden among in this thing. They see that there's somebody had made a campfire here. They're not here now. And he finds around the campfire an actual minted coin of the North. It is a coin minted with the profile of King Osbert of the North. And this coin would not be seen. They didn't hand coins around. This signals that there is some legitimate transaction in which the king gave coin to another party. They immediately put two and two together that these men are in league with Northwich. They're in league with the King of the North. They have been paid to do so, or at least that's their assumption. We don't really know whose coin it is. We don't really know how the coin got there, but they immediately say this might be tied to the King of the North. So Savrik orders Wilhelm, with this being understood, you need to go and you need to take this coin as evidence that we may have a bigger problem than just Vikings, right? Meanwhile, Savrik is fatigued and battered, and they've hiked all night long chasing these Vikings, so he has had no rest. He's bordering on injured, right? As his conditions can't reset, they've been forced marching. So he rests there. We narrate back to my characters. My character gets closer to Dredgewater. I am working on saying Harold, and I am constantly walking up to this guy and scrutinizing him, and I am basically happy. You know, I mean, I'm thinking we're going to do this. We're going to do this thing. But I keep going back to him and kind of reminding him, I'm Harold. I'm Harold. Because I need him to understand how important it is that he says I'm Harold. He needs to understand that this is, I'm going to Dredgewater, and he needs to be in league with who I'm claiming to be. But I don't have a lot of capabilities to express this, right? As we get closer, there's a moment where, as we get closer, I describe my character getting more nervous because we're now getting to the moment of truth. Is this going to work? Is this plan of mine to become a member of society going to work? For what I don't even know what size. All I've ever seen of Dredgewater is there's people there and there's stuff's happening, and they don't have to live alone in the woods, and they aren't. And so I stop Harold and I take his dagger to be even more uniform, and I give him my ratty dagger, and I say to him, Harold, and at this point, I'm saying Harold almost completely now, Harold, right? I've worked out that I can almost finish it, Harold. And David says, yes, you're Harold. My character smiles and then grabs him by the arm and pinches his bicep and says, through his facial expressions, his eyes, it is, if it's between me or him, it will be me. In other words, I send a subtle threat. Even after he's announced, yeah, I know you're Harold, I send that final threat. Do not mess this up for me, kind of thing, right? Because my character wants desperately to be a part of Dredgewater, right? Okay. And we head off toward there. Meanwhile, Sam is running all night long. He makes a body check to see, if he can make it. And that, of course, he accrues fatigued and battered. So by the time he's run for a day and a half, all of this is happening kind of simultaneously as we do screen ripes, if you can imagine, as meanwhile, this is happening, right? We arrive, my character arrives at a carnival that is entering the walls of Dredgetown. And my character gets caught up in the carnival, gets caught up in the tumblers and the colors and the bells and the music, and immediately forgets, as he's like an 8-year-old child, I run toward the beautiful colored tapestries and the bells that are dangling on the wagons. They're like carnival gypsies, all right? They're like gypsy carnival. And my character gets completely sidetracked by this amazing thing. Dredgewater is greater than I ever imagined. This is Dredgewater. It is amazing, which ironically, it's not Dredgewater at all. They're visiting entertainers. but my character doesn't know that. So I'm thinking, behind those walls all this time, this is what's been going on. And the woman, the matriarch of the entertainers, sees me and it treats me better than anyone other than the woman who raised me had, and invites me to get on the cart and invites me to eat strawberries. And my character happily sits on the cart with her as they roll in. David has a great scene where the guards around her cart, one of them looks at her and says, "Are you okay with this, guy?" As I walk up and I'm literally taking bells from the cart. I'm grabbing and taking stuff like a child. And she said, "Yes, I've got it under control." It's a great moment where, David describes how these guards are aware of me, but they won't act unless she says. She invites me on the cart. I join her on the cart. We roll into Dredgetown. Meanwhile, Willem arrives, exhausted, bumps into a guard, collapses to his knees and says, "We must warn Washburn," and then passes out. All right. I don't know if they made a roll or if he just narrated that would be the next condition as we move from battered to injured. I can't remember if they made a roll for that or not. I think they did, but he passes out. He wakes up, doesn't know how long, and he has a chat with Faustus, David's character, and he presents the coin to David before he passes out again as he's exhausted from having run for a day and a half, and says, "You must take this to Washburn. We have a Viking war party on the southern border, and they may have been paid by the King of the North." And meanwhile, Saverick has spent the 2 days watching and getting all the information he can. And we end the session really with him lighting the beacon fire, which is why I titled the video, the AP, Light the Beacon. And at the very end, he basically lights the beacon and to send that message. And we light the beacon and we draw the curtains on this amazing, amazing session. It's rare that I get to play role-playing games that are not about a thing like collecting treasure, fighting wars, right? It's amazing to just be able to make a character like Melton and actually see a character arc. I mean, I have completed an arc with him. I will happily walk away from Harold now, right? I actually took his name in session. When the soldier said back to me, "Yeah, I know you're Harold. I get it. You're Harold." I changed the name of my character. My character is now Harold. But then he finds, in a way, a surrogate family, which oddly enough, David had rolled Carnival entertainers. Who else would take in this disfigured creature but Carnival? It was magical. But I'm done. Harold is done. He's got what he wants. Even if he doesn't realize he's not a member of Dredgewater, he's not a citizen of Dredgewater. But he's part of a Carnival, and this woman is taking him in, for good or ill. I'm done. I mean, Harold, I have completed an arc in 2 sessions. First session, I don't even speak to anybody, right? And matter of fact, there's like 45 minutes that I don't say a word in the entire session. This session was a sum total of a character's reaching an actual goal. And I'm really done. I don't really care whether Harold goes off with a carnival to travel all around UK or not, all around England or not, right? His character arc is complete. He's now an NPC. He can be part of the RSCs for Sam's because Sam's going to run the next session. He's going to run session 4. Harold might be in his RSCs, or the carnival might be in the RSCs. It doesn't make any difference. Harold has found his place. We have a great moment where she says to Harold, "Harold, you need to remove the helmet and the tabard. Here, take this." And I asked, "Is it colorful?" Because Harold would have been at that point, Harold would have basically said, "Listen, I know this helmet and this tabard are how I got in here. This might be this might be the only thing that makes me part of this." But when she shows him this beautiful colored and points out the other carnival tumblers and things that you're going to wear what they're wearing, I can't resist the colorful, beautiful garb. And so I narrate how I strip all that off and I put the carnival garb on, and my character's now become a carny. Yeah, as Dell says, you're now part of the carnies. It's the perfect it was a wonderful experience to play this character, this extreme character, but be able to find in the delusional, fevered, illogical mind of an 8-year-old wild man who's 25 years old, and everything he's experienced, the sum total of his goal would have been to achieve entrance into Dredgewater, or to at least think he could be a part of civilization, even though he is so far removed from understanding society, and it's done. There's nowhere else that can go other than, you know. So I had an experience that I really get to have. There was real pathos for me in this. I think there was pathos for all of us. Certainly, Sam made the remark when I approached the cart, and Sam said under his breath, "This is tragic. I mean, this is tragic." There was pathos there, and pathos for me, the way David uh, presented these remarkable NPCs that allowed me to exercise the character, right? Unbelievable, brilliant session. And it's rare that I get to see a character go, again, in D&D, you just keep playing and playing and playing until you die, or until you reach level 9, or until the campaign dies, or you get tired of the games. But it's rare I get to see an arc. And the irony is I got to see an arc really in 1.5 sessions. And it's a completed arc for me. So I told the guys I'll probably make a new character, and in session 4 I will introduce a new character that is more readily social, and able to at least be a part of a grander, or more, it won't be such a troublesome thing to be a part of. But had I not stepped out and said, I'm going to play a character that makes this really hard for me, and it's going to make it really hard for David, it's going to make it difficult for the guys, I wouldn't have been able to have this kind of transition, this kind of character arc. And people say, oh, character arcs can't happen that fast. The heck they can. When my background is I'm a 25-year-old, wild man. And in one session, I'm able to at least reach the promised land, which would have, to me, would have been to be in Dredgewater without being chased away with pitchforks, right? Or hung, or whatever, right? Or beaten, or stoned, right? Anyway, very, very cool. Now I could continue with Harold, and we could see how his adventures go in the carnival, or how the carnival, the actual entertainers go in the right. But I think it's better to wrap up Harold, and then Sam's next session could start 2 weeks down the road, could start 15 minutes later, whatever, right? So Sam isn't stuck too having to deal with me traveling around England with the carnival, right? Which we could do. I mean, we've designed our game where I could literally have my own stories and adventures separate from Dredgewater. Um, but I don't know how far I can go with Harold. Harold's going to ultimately find his home among these gypsies, these entertainers. There isn't much more I'm going to do there. And again, even as an arrested 8-year-old, I'm only going to get so much societal understanding, and that society is going to come solely from my gypsy family. Basically, I can imagine he's only going to learn how to relate to all the carnival people and to what he does to help those people achieve their goals, which is robbing blind every village they meet, right? So, but those could be grand adventures, completely devoid of traditional D&D tropes, so to speak, right? Which is why Dark Age of Man is a different game. It's a different system. It creates a different environment to play different kinds of human beings, right? Okay, uh, amazing. So I want to talk a little bit about the game itself. So David, again, I mean, this just fits right in. It's how David had his random variables, his RSCs, how he completely used them and presented them are 100% exactly the thing we want. We want, again, them to be naive. We want the presenter to be naive. We want the players to be naive. And we only all know what we all know. And then we learn things all together, right? He learns that he's rolled a witch on the chart. When he introduces the witch, we learn there might be a witch, right? We may not know it's a witch, but he'll introduce the witch, and we'll learn maybe somehow, some way, depending on our interactions, that she may be a witch, or it may be a witch. But the point is, he's learning this stuff and presenting it to us, and then we learn it. Like, again, we're all learning these things together. So what David did that was particularly special last night, and I talked about this, I'm not even as good at this as I'd like to be. Imagine when the GM presents what they're going to present, describe the situation, the location, the moment, right? But when we go around back to in Dark Age of Man, what you would like to see happen, and we talked, Dale and I have talked about this ad infinitum from the beginning. Player agency is a little more than just making decisions, and your decisions matter, right? We know what player agency really is. Hey, we want to build a raft across the river. You can't say no. No, great idea. Go for it. How are we going to build a raft, right? That's agency. You don't ignore what people say. You don't ignore what the players want to do. When you do, you're railroading them. You're deciding their fate. So that's basic player agency. The next phase of that is giving me the space to define the moment. And I was describing to my wife this morning over breakfast, what is that? What is the metaphor for that? Imagine you step up onto the front stoop, right? And you're going to knock on the door. David he gives us space to step up on the front stoop, right? I have the space to describe the entrance into the moment. And then there'll be the knock at the door, right? Knock, knock, who's there, right? Knock, knock, who's there? I describe Melton running into the forest, right? David then responds to that. I describe I climb a tree. David responds to that. I describe I'm looking for Harold. What's going on? David will ask for a roll or not ask for a roll. I'm describing this stuff. I am, as Dale said deftly in our post conversation about Ivan's last session, players in a way are their own GM. I'm describing, right? I was the one who said, this is my goal. And if I have to flat say, this is because you got to communicate clearly, in character, as character, fine, but there has to be meta moments where I want to make clear to David what Melton's, at the time he was Melton the outcast, now he's Harold, what my goals are here. My goals are to cut him off and get in front of him. David doesn't know why. He's naive. Okay, yeah, there's no problem. You can do that, or let's make a roll to see if you can outrun him or you can get in front of him. And then there's going to be the encounter, and I'm going to describe how I step out, what I look like, what I do. He's going to call in a roll, or he's going to respond in character. He responded, let's make a prestige roll because you've described this hideous creature that steps out of the darkness wearing a tabard of Dredgewater. And I failed the roll miserably. He responded in kind, terrified, steps away, draws his dagger, threatens me with it. And then a second encounter as I smack his hand away like it's feeble. You're not going to touch me with that. Not violent. I just smack his feeble attempt to stab me away, and he panics and passes out. When we come back, when he goes away, he gives them the threshold. I'll call it a threshold. David gives Dell and Sam a threshold to start the scene, right? He doesn't go back and tell them. He goes back to them and says, and he gives them a threshold for Saverick to say, I've been watching this camp for 2 days. I've been watching this camp. What I'm counting heads. I'm looking what direction. Can I see a ship? Right? And David just goes, yeah. As opposed to this long-winded description of the whole scene. He lets Saverick describe what he's looking for and looking at. And then he says, you see guys come and go. You see a ship. Instead of describing, this is what you've been seeing for the last few hours. He could, but he allows this threshold, the doorstep for me to walk up. He gives me the threshold to knock the door. Knock, knock, who's there? As opposed to him saying, who's there, waiting for my knock, knock, right? It is, David is absolutely natural at this presenter naive narrator. David is doing this better than I do this, right? In my opinion, I tend to want to narrate and set the scene. It's difficult for me to say, let's trust the players to do that. But then again, you have to be with a group of players that's willing to set the scene. They don't have to make conclusions about the truth. But instead of telling Saverick where you're at, let Saverick tell you where he's at. Let him say, we've been hiding here at this broken down old Roman ruin for 2 days, waiting for the army to come or for something to happen. I've been watching, spying. What am I learning? Okay, it's been 2 days. I'm healed up now. I've rested here 2 days. I've watched all these guys. I'm going to light the beacons because nobody's come, right? I haven't heard back from Joff or from Wilmot or from anyone for that matter. I'm lighting the beacons. He gives me the threshold to describe Melton. He gives me the threshold to, as I describe Melton, getting while he's unconscious, getting close and scrutinizing every line in his face. I have not had an opportunity to see a human being, this close up. So you can imagine my curiosity as I'm looking at another human being. I'm scrutinizing him in the campfire light. Those are chances for me to express my character. It's a chance for me to express my in character as character. There is a real curiosity about this soldier, this tabard, these people I could never get close to that were always so hostile. Poor guy has pissed himself and passed out. I'm going to scrutinize his face, and so when then he wakes up, this hideous monster is right nose to nose with him again, and we got to make some rolls as he reacts, etc. We go back, and I tell David, we are coming closer to Dredgewater. And this is what's been happening on our hike back to Dredgewater. I have been growing nervous. I'm coming back. I'm closer. I'm constantly telling him, I'm Harold, I'm Harold, I'm Harold. And that sets the scene for David to respond and say, yeah, I know you're Harold. And we have that moment where my character goes, I am Harold. Thank you. You get it. Now don't mess it up, right? We led the dance, but we didn't draw conclusions. We didn't create the truth. We led the dance. And I hearken back to 8 years ago, or whatever it was, when I was in that Joff, Lamentations of the Flame Princess campaign with Lee and Josh, and Ivan was running those. And the first few minutes, as after Ivan's described her impression, he's described a certain time of the year, and he said some things. He says, "Where's Jurgen?" And I was given the threshold to describe Jurgen from head to tail. I set the tone that it was snowing. I had a sack over my back. What's in the sack? The head of my mentor, as he was burned at the stake, and I'm carrying around my mentors, and I'm setting the tone of who Jurgen is and why is he carrying his former boss's head in a sack. And that set the tone for this Lamentations campaign, because I was given some space to introduce not just my character, but this kind of theme, this kind of thing, and who is Jurgen, right? And then there's this curiosity. What are you carrying your former boss's head around for, right? And that leads to an opening scene, in shelter. And that's Dark Age of Man is saying, let's do that every time we go to a player. David steps back and says, Jason, let's go back to you. And there's the pause to let me say, well, my goal was to go to Dredgewater. Instead of me saying, no, we've been hiking towards Dredgewater, so where are we at now? That's not in character, right? In characters, we're closer to Dredgewater, and this is what I've been doing over the last few hours, is we're getting closer to Dredgewater. And David, with aplomb, handles that. He reacts to that. Again, this is improv. Yes, and yes, but. He can say something, then I go, yes, and yes, but. It's improvisational role play in character as character. But I get the threshold to approach the door, knock, knock, who's there? And it was brilliant. For me, the best experience in this session was seeing my character, who I really had no clue how I was going to possibly engage outside of being a crazy wild man. I had to put myself in the mindset of why would he be following these guys? What is it he's about? When he has an opportunity to get a soldier alone and get the tabard and the helmet. As I described in session one of the reasons I'm following them is I see these soldiers. These are men that at Dredgewater have routinely chased me away. I'm curious, what are they doing out here? But I'm curious because those tabards mean something to my character. They represent the thing that won't let me into Dredgewater. Later, I have the opportunity to secure this thing, and I can be Dredgewater. In my weird, arrested 8-year-old mind. And then to see the natural transition, and I had no idea what was going to happen as I approached Dredgewater. They clearly weren't going to say, "Hey, dude." They would have, but because he had rolled entertainers in a carnival entertainers, and the way he rolled he rolled that seed in front of us all as we're going through the gates, which he didn't describe, but going into Dredgetown basically for the final day of the festival, right? And my character responding immediately to this description. He didn't know my character would have completely ignored it. He didn't know my character would have said, what's that? And just walked into Dredgewater past the guards. But I was immediately caught up in that, and she got me on the wagon. And of course, Joff ran away. He ran from me like hell. In a way, I technically kidnapped Joff out of sheer terror. I didn't threaten him. I didn't manhandle him, but out of sheer terror, and because we were headed the same direction, he just went along with me. But technically, in a way, my character took, in a psychological way, kidnapped this poor soldier, right? So you can imagine the minute my character's caught up in this overwhelming color and sound, he ran like hell toward Washburn, toward the man at arms, to tell him there's Vikings south, right? It's amazing. So yeah, how often do we get to complete a character arc in any role playing? I would say, yeah, over the course of a Call of Cthulhu campaign, you're going to complete a character to a degree. Call of Cthulhu, of course, the story may end and you manage to come out of it with some sanity, or your tale will end when you completely lose your mind. So there's an arc, kind of, but it's an arc toward the story or the mystery that you're dealing with. And that arc is going to you're either going to survive it with some sanity or you are going to ultimately go insane. So your arc is actually arrested to a degree. The arc, depending on your character and what and I'm not saying role playing has to have a character arc, but to actually have an opportunity to achieve an arc is very rare, and it's super rare to do it in 1.5 sessions. I did it in 3 hours, and satisfied, completely satisfied that I could retire Harold, Melton, now Harold, as part of the Carnies. And I will create a new character to introduce for session 4 into the group for Sam. And that's a rewarding experience, and I haven't had it. Jurgen was close. I mean, over 6 sessions of Lamentations. I think Jurgen, there was a Mogan in that, right, where, I was a cleric, and there was, I think, session 2 or 3 in frustration. Jurgen in the snow dropped to his knees, cast away his holy symbol, and abandoned his god and became a fighter. So I went from a cleric to a fighter and of course with the okay of Ivan. Ivan said, sure, if you want to become a fighter, go ahead. So I cast away my cleric class in frustration with my god, and became a fighter. And all of that happened through in-character, as character play because of my level of frustration with what it was I couldn't achieve, right? And it was legitimate. And I cast it away. Even if he said, well, you got to stay a cleric, Jason, I just wouldn't have exercised any of my abilities. I would have been a cleric with a blunt weapon and armor. I would have never used turn undead. I would have never used spells. I would have been a cleric who's in a way castrated himself, so to speak, right? And that was an arc. And by the end, when I died, it was a satisfactory character. It was a satisfactory death. And again, I was fortunate to get a chance to play Lamentations. I was fortunate to get a chance to play Lamentations and D20 and have an opportunity to play in a early, sophisticated experience that was one of my first player experiences of that length. Right, I've played before, but they were all one-offs or goofing around or whatever. It was that was an amazing experience. So ironically, probably my first serious experience as a player, I actually was able to play over 6 sessions and complete a satisfactory life. Right, I've said before, there is no such thing as a meaningful death in games. There is only meaningful life. If you've had a meaningful character, the death will be meaningful, right? You don't ask, what's a great way to die? You say, oh man, that's moving because we really liked Jurgen. Our dude Jurgen was memorable, so his death kind of sucks. How I die is irrelevant. What's relevant is this human being that existed that we all go, Harold, in a way, is complete. And I think we all would agree that taking Harold beyond this point defeats the design of the character, right? And by the way, this isn't written. We don't write this. We're just experiencing it. And I'm saying, well, what would he want? Well, he'd want to go back to Dredgewater. He would want to be accepted to the gates of Dredgewater. So I'm going to steal the tabard. I'm going to put on the helm and I'm going to walk through the door like I'm like, hey, this is what gets me in here, not knowing that they're going to say, who the hell are you? Because I'm oblivious. But that's what I'm thinking. And I was expecting it to be a bitter end for Harold at the gates. And it just so happened that it coincided with an RSC of entertainers in a carnival rolling through the doors. And fantastic. So Dark Age of Man, again, we've been playtesting it for 4 years, toying with the ideas, writing it, developing it, playtesting it. And I got to tell you, every experience I have is truly remarkable, whether I'm running it or I'm playing it. And I got to say, I know it sounds ridiculous. Well, of course, it's your game. It's going to be. Our game is the only one I'm playing or experiencing and have that really allows for these kinds of characters, these kinds of experiences. And as a GM, it's the only one that's liberated me to be a player / presenter, a naive narrator. I know there are other games that have certain mechanics that try to create this. I know I could use a GM emulator for any game if I want to ease the load of making decisions, but it won't ease the load of the D20 compartmentalized procedural formula of rules, right? And it isn't going to ask players to take agency. That will never change. My GM emulator just makes the job easier for me, and I don't have to make all the decisions. It's not going to give Eloy the threshold to tell us where he's headed and what he's about to do. Give us the threshold so I can step up, knock, knock, and then the GM, who's there and what's there? What are you doing? What are you doing? And that's the best way I can describe it, right? And I like let me take the first 2 steps into the scene. Trust that Dell knows he's on the mountaintop. He's in the broken down old watchtower, and he's spying over the walls what's going on for days. Trust him that he's going to say, what do I learn about what I've been watching? I'm healed up. Nobody's come. What information do I get? David says, this is what information you get. Make a roll. Make a mind check. Okay, this is what you get. And then he turns and says, I'm lighting the beacon. To me, it is perfect role playing. It's perfect role playing. It's not perfect gaming, and it's not meant to be the best experience. It's meant to be a particular type of experience. And I am in character as character role playing. And the game is still there. The mystery is still there. The conflict and challenges are still there. But I would not have experienced this kind of character and this kind of arc in any other game system. And I know there'll be people say, oh, you can do this. Well, you can do anything and anything. They haven't done it for me. They haven't allowed this kind of event quickly, right? This kind of machinations in 3 hours, a complete character achievement. And that's it. There's nothing else that Harold could ever want. He found a family. He's found a place. It's full of everything he dreamed it would be. He ain't leaving this. He won't leave this. He is not going to wander off from it. He ain't going to, right? Harold is done. He is completed. The best an 8-year-old arrested adult could be, right? And that's, he'll either live happily ever after, or it'll end in some disaster on the road with bandits, hijacking the caravan and killing everybody, right? That's a story that we may never know, right? But it's great. Fantastic. Again, David just naturally gives us that room to take the lead, right? We're in a dance, but I'm leading it. So when we come back to us on the dance floor, I'm the one turning them around. I'm the one dipping them, right? We don't know where we're going after that, but so amazing. Thank you for watching. I am done sharing this recap and reflections. Bye.